Hi, everybody. This is Mr. Veenstra. I am recording some of these World War II lessons real quick so people can get the notes. Nobody showed up for my first period Zoom lesson, so maybe I'll just start canceling that. I'll keep it open for a little while. We'll see how it goes. All right, so let's go to the lesson. Okay, today's set of lessons are all going to be about the U.S., the home front during World War II. The U.S. home front. All right, the first thing that we need to do, I'm not sure what letter we're on as a group, so I'm just going to start with where I kind of think we are. We're going to go with R. All right, so big number R, women on the home front. I think that the first thing that we need to put in here is that the role of women on the home front in World War II is absolutely, totally vital, super important. The United States absolutely would not have won if it wasn't for women on the home front. I've said this a couple of times, and I'll say it again. Ever since we get the Industrial Revolution, we have World War I, World War II. Heroes don't win wars; industry wins wars. Right? World War II is absolutely 100% proves that to be true. Industry wins wars. The person who wins the wars is the person who can create the largest number of like battleships and tanks and guns and planes and bombs and stuff like that. And World War II is all of that to the max. It's insane. Okay, so as the war begins, starting in 41, 40, 41, 42, 43, as it begins, the men all start going off to war. The men all become soldiers, but the factories still need to stay open. And very quickly, women start moving into the role of these factory workers. And we start getting women showing up in all sorts of roles. You know, here they are making shells that are going to be shot out. Here they are putting the rivets on what will become a Jeep or something, a car or something like that. And we have lots and lots of examples of this, of women working in industrial factories all over the country, not just the industrial center of Michigan, but in California, in the East Coast, like New York, New Jersey, and down south, Alabama, Florida. We have some of the assignments on Canvas that have been about that. A lot of you guys have done those assignments. Women end up taking over the course of the war. Women end up taking over about 2/3 of the jobs. This is an airplane factory in Seattle, Washington. This is a gun factory down in Los Angeles. And the women end up taking over about 2/3 of all the jobs. And one of the things that you have to understand, and this would be the next line down, is that the United States industrial output is larger than any country the world has ever seen, including today. Up into and including today, the United States during World War II produces more stuff than anyone ever, any country ever. By the end of the war, the United States by itself, just the United States, is accounting for almost 2/3 of the entire global economy. And that sounds like an insanely high number. It is an insanely high number, but you have to understand that the other major industrial powers, Germany, the Soviet Union, the UK, Japan, all those industrial countries have been destroyed, right? Most of their cities are gone, and the United States isn't. Okay. The United States is able to keep all of its factories running at this insane clip because we have so many women who can work in the factories, and so many women have at least a basic education, basic literacy, basic math literacy, that they can run these machines, they can work all these machines, they can do all this stuff. So that's a huge thing. By the end of the war, the United States is putting a new airplane in the air every like 4 minutes, and a new battleship in the water every 2 hours, or a new ship, a naval ship in the water every like 2 hours. Right? The United States ends up providing the majority of weapons used by the Soviet Union, the majority of weapons used by England, the majority of weapons used by China, the majority of the weapons used by everybody, basically. And the United States is not just weapons. The United States also produces food for everybody as well. We'll talk a little bit about food in a moment. Here's the most famous image from World War II, Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter. This is the original Rosie the Riveter picture that shows up in Life magazine, and this is the one that gets used later as the very famous poster, right? Um, Rosie is an actual person, kind of. So the woman in this picture posed for the picture. She had worked in a factory in Michigan and posed for the picture. The idea of Rosie the Riveter actually came from a Latino woman down in Los Angeles, but the artist decided it was better to make her white. So I think this one is fake. This one is just a fake person, but this one is an actual real person. Um, okay, so women make all of the equipment, right? You sometimes will hear an argument that the men are the ones actually fighting the wars and the men are the ones who are, shooting Nazis and, being shot at and stuff. And that's true. But if it wasn't for the women, those men wouldn't have guns or bullets or boots or clothes or planes or trucks or boats or anything like that. And just some naked dude running through the forests of Germany is much less threatening than soldiers who are fully armed and equipped. All right. PQR, that was R, S. All right, so let's go to S. S, we're going to stick with women for a moment, and then we'll go back and do African Americans. S, Homefront economics. Again, this is all women, or not all women, but mostly women. This is mostly the realm of women. Because the United States needs to feed so many soldiers, including all of the Soviets and British soldiers and other allied soldiers, because the United States needs all that food, the government starts to say that all the farm food needs to go to the soldiers, and that the people at home need to do without their food, right? They need to figure out something else. And so one of the big things that they do is what's called victory gardens. Victory gardens. So a victory garden is a garden during World War II that was meant to feed your family. Okay, so women, primarily women, start to grow big gardens. They start converting parts of their yards and their homes and stuff gardens. They start making community gardens. A lot of like parks get turned into gardens, community gardens, where all of the women of the neighborhood can all come and work in the same garden. In the grounds of like churches and parks and stuff. And the goal here is for women in the home to grow as much food at home as possible to feed the kids and to feed themselves. That way, the more food that they can grow at home and eat at home, the less food they have to buy from big giant agro business companies. In addition, we have rationing and stamps. So the government will issue a bunch of these like stamps that if you want to go to the grocery store to buy something, you have to use these stamps in order to buy it. So you have to pay money and stamps, right? So like coffee here, right? So you'll go to the thing, and in order to keep Americans from buying too much stuff at home and taking it away from the soldiers, they'll say your family is only allowed to have, say, 1 can of coffee a month, right? And in order to buy a can of coffee, you have to show 5 stamps plus the money, right? And if you show those 5 stamps, you buy your coffee, and then you run out of coffee in the second week, you just don't have coffee for the rest of the month. You have to wait for the next month to buy more coffee. There's a lot of this stuff for flour, for all sorts of stuff, for all sorts of stuff. This includes things like gasoline, rubber, like buying new tires and stuff like that. The rubber that goes into the soles of shoes and stuff. You can't buy new shoes. You can't buy nylons. You can't buy all sorts of lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. Basically, anything that could be packaged up and useful for soldiers is rationed. Okay, I think this is good. All right, so QRST, let's go to T. All right, so T, let's do African Americans in the war. What I want you to, African Americans in the war, I'm sorry, say African Americans in the home front. What we're going to call it is the double V campaign. Double V campaign. And write out the word double and then put the letter V. and put V in quotes. So the double V campaign is a campaign by African American civil rights leaders to get victory at home, or victory abroad and victory at home. So victory against the Germans and Japanese, and then victory against racism at home. And they make an argument, A. Philip Randolph, the gentleman right here in the colorized photo, A. Philip Randolph makes an argument that African Americans are fighting two wars. They're fighting the war against our enemies, and they're fighting the war against racism. A. Philip Randolph, this guy right here, working with his close buddy Bayard Rustin right here, these two men are really, really important for the civil rights movement, which is going to be starting up after World War II. But Randolph is the head of the largest African American labor union in the United States, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. It's the largest labor union in the United States. It's based out of Washington, D.C. And when the war gets started, all the factories become nationalized, and so the government is running all of the factories, and a lot of the factory workers don't want to hire Black people. And so these government contracts are all going out, and only white people are being allowed to work them. And so Randolph and Rustin call for a strike. And so the African American Labor Union goes on strike, and all of the other labor unions start to follow as well. Roosevelt, FDR can't have this, of course. So FDR goes and talks to the strike, and he says, we can't have you striking during the war. We need you to be working. And Randolph says, we want to work. We want to support the war. We want to help you, but you have to make it so that Black people can work in the factories as well. So Franklin Roosevelt issues Executive Order 8802. 8802 is where Roosevelt orders that all federal contracts must be race blind, that they must hire both Blacks and whites. They have to hire everybody. And as soon as FDR issues this order, then Randolph has all of the unions go back to work, and the whole country, they go back to work. Now, the majority of Black men are being drafted into the war, of course. So we're talking a lot about like Black women and like older Black men who are like too old to fight, or people who have been injured or, had a sickness or something like that couldn't fight. All right. What was that? QRST. So T is the African Americans in the war, the double V campaign. All right, T, let's go with U. All right, so this is another one that is kind of a little bit tricky. It's kind of a little bit weird. So for U, we're going to call it ENIAC. ENIAC. And ENIAC breaks out to be the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. This is famous because it is the first supercomputer. Yeah, so the very first computer had been invented like 70 or 80 years ago, right? Really, really basic stuff. Where, no, the really, really first computer was older than that, 100 and something years ago. But it was really, really basic. Like you could only do like addition and subtraction, basically. This is the first one that has multiple uses where you can like program it and use it. And I want to take a moment and point out some of these names that are going on here. So Eckert and Mauchly are the two primary inventors of the computer, of ENIAC. They're the two primary inventors, right? But one of the really important contributors early on is this guy named Geoffrey Chuanchu. He is an immigrant from Taiwan, a Chinese immigrant from Taiwan, and he's one of the very, very early architects of the inside of the machine. Betty Jean Jennings and Fran Bilas are two of the lead programmers of the machine. They're actually leading an entire team of women who are working in this machine. This stands out, right? If we are looking at this, Nazi Germany would never have had women working in something like this. And Nazi Germany never would have allowed a Chinese immigrant to work with them, right? This is something uniquely American that Americans are kind of tapping into these other aspects of our society. What does ENIAC do? ENIAC, basically during World War II, ENIAC tracks ship movements in the oceans, and it also does the calculations for figuring out the trajectories for bombings. to shoot like ships and stuff. And that's primarily what it's doing. They also use it to crack codes, or they do, but it isn't as famous as some other code cracking stuff, like the British are better at that than we are. But mostly it's used for trajectories on bombs and like locating ships, tracking the movements of ships during the war. After the war, it gets used for a bunch of other stuff. It's going to eventually be replaced by the equipment that takes into the space race. V, let's go with V. This will be our last one for today. Native American code talkers. Native American code talkers. Okay. So pretty early in the war, we find that our communications are being intercepted, and that the Germans and the Japanese are cracking our codes. And they crack our codes, and then once they crack the code, they know where our ships are, they know where our planes are, they know what our plans are, and so they can defend themselves and kill our people. Most of the time, this is what we call cryptology, CRYPTOLOGY. Cryptology is making things into codes. So most of the time, codes are mathematical codes, where you take like a word or a phrase, and you turn that word or phrase, each letter gets turned into a number, and then you have a whole set of numbers, and then those sets of numbers all get put in through mathematical algorithms, and the algorithm changes based on like what time the message is made, right? So if the message was made at a time that ends in an odd number minutes, right? Then you use this code, you use this algorithm. If it's an even number, then you use this algorithm. If it's, stuff like that. The problem with that, it works, but there's a couple of problems. So you put problems with cryptology. The problems is everybody knows math. And so everyone can crack it. And the Germans and the Japanese are very good at math. So they can crack the codes. So that's one problem. The other problem is that the codes take longer, right? Because you have to do a bunch of math and stuff in order to break the codes. And so it's a much faster or much longer thing, right? But it takes a lot longer. The United States needs a code that they can work. And what they find is they find a resource that the United States has and no one else in the world has. And that resource is Native Americans. College professors come to the Army and they say, hey, these native languages are not connected. They're not related to any other languages in the world. The only place in the world that you're going to find Navajo speakers is like Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado, right? You're never going to find them anywhere in Europe or anywhere in Asia. Navajo is going to be the largest group. They're going to be a little bit more than half of the group. But Comanche, Choctaw, Hopi, and Cherokee tribes also get used. But Navajo is the big one. That's the big one. It's the majority, more than half. What they do is they go to the Indian reservations and they start to recruit these Native Americans. And the Native Americans join the army. And so you'll have like 2 Native Americans on the front with the soldiers getting shot at, and then 2 in the back in the headquarters receiving messages and stuff, messages. And what they do is they speak Navajo to each other. They take everything and they turn it into codes. There's a lot of words that they don't have. So like the word battleship becomes whale, right? The word airplane becomes bird. An aircraft carrier becomes a bird carrier, right? A submarine becomes an iron fish, right? It becomes like metal fish or iron fish, right? And so they break it up into all these code words, right? So they're able to speak very, very quickly to each other. So over the radio, they can say something like, whale tooth come, slant eye, birds overhead, right? And then the other guy on the other end knows that that code would mean that like Japanese planes are attacking this battleship. Okay, this has a couple of advantages. Okay, so you put underneath there advantages of using Native American code talkers. The advantages. Advantage number 1, it's a language. You can't crack it. You can't do math on it. It's a language, right? So the only way to do the language is learn the language. okay? Number two, it's unique to the United States. No other country in the world can do this, okay? Number three, it's fast. Speakers can just speak, right? And you can mix things up, and you can say things in different ways, and you can use idioms, and you can use metaphors and stuff like that, right? Like you can really speak. So it's fast. They speak back and forth at the speed of a conversation, right? And instead of having to break codes. Okay. And the last really big advantage is it's easy to hear over like loud, like gunfire and stuff like that. Because you can just be on the radio and you could say, hey, Japanese fighters have come and they're dropping bombs in this area over here. And the other person can hear most of the message, lock in on just the one or two things they didn't hear and say, hey, can you repeat that? How many ships, how many planes did you say? Oh, there's 10. Oh, did you say 10? Yeah, I said, right? Like that kind of a conversation is much faster than a conversation that's all in like mathematical code where you're like 43, 86, 22, 52, 53, and then the guy calls back and says, I missed a number, repeat it, right? And then he has to repeat 12 digits. So what I like to point out in this part is that the United States wins this war partially, at least in part, by embracing the diversity of our country, right? We embrace the women, letting women work and letting women be part of the process. We embrace having African Americans be part of the process. We embrace our Native Americans. We embrace the Chinese immigrant and women in the computer programming, right? This is something that the United States is not unique. We're not the only diverse country in the world. But in World War II, we're fighting the two most racist countries the world maybe has ever seen, Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, right? We're fighting two of the most racist countries in the world, two countries that would never let women be part of the war, two countries that would never let immigrants in and let immigrants be part of the war, two countries that would never let racial minorities or other groups, right? Two countries that would never do that, and they lose. We win partially because we embrace that diversity. I think that's important to think about, right? We win for other reasons too. I'm not saying it's the only reason we win. We win because we have more factories than anyone in the world, and our factories don't get bombed. We win because we have a massive army. We win because we have the largest navy in the world. We win because of the bravery of the men fighting. We win because of lots of things, right? But one of the things that contributes is this embracing of diversity. I'm not saying it's perfect. The United States of the 1940s is quite racist still, right? Quite racist, quite prejudiced. But we're embracing it more than Nazi Germany. We're embracing it more than Imperial Japan. And I think that's important to point out. All right. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.